get the best player at any position. Wow. Why would you do that? Just because you took a quarterback last year, so you have to get a tackle to protect the quarterback you drafted last year? No, you have to look at the pieces you already have, and then you make that assessment or not. You need one, but that doesn't mean you need to go get one. You might already have one. That was some Yogi Berra right there. But so that kicked off what is continuing to be a whirlwind of trade activity in the NFL draft, even a week before the draft yet. It's only going to get crazier here for this final weekend on draft day and draft weekend, one would expect. Now, for the record, it was about 30 minutes after the story broke that the St. Louis Rams traded up to the number one pick that I figured it out and told my friends that I was, in a van with at the time that I know who the Rams traded to take at number one. I know who they're taking at number one. It's not Wentz. It's Goff. They're taking Jared Goff, number one. I know it. I just know it. And boom, sure enough, a couple hours later, day or two later, finally, a week later, everybody's finally on that bandwagon with me now, and it's almost consensus. Duh, I told you. So then, that opened the door for the most recent trade, where the Philadelphia Eagles moved up from 8 to 1. 8 to 2. They traded with the Cleveland Browns, who, by all measures, people thought would be wanting to pick a quarterback, and now would have, we're in a perfect position to either pick the quarterback they wanted or the other quarterback, because there's two quarterbacks believed, for sure, first round, fairly can't misses, and that's Jared Goff and Carson Wentz. Goff is much more of a right now guy with a little bit less potential. Wentz is a little bit more of a developmental project with, sky's the limit ceiling for his potential. That is why I think it makes perfect sense for the Philadelphia Eagles to draft Carson Wentz number 2, which they will, now that they've traded for the second pick, following their re-signing of Sam Bradford to a 2-year, $16 million a year freaking contract that blew my mind. Basically, this like I said, this is perfect because Wentz isn't ready to come in and start his rookie season. At least that's what everything suggests. Granted, that's not always right, but look at Brock Osweiler. I think that's a good comparison. Granted, he played against better competition than Carson Wentz did, but he's a big physical guy that needs time to develop yet, though, as a quarterback. And that's what the Broncos did. They already had their quarterback. They weren't drafting him to start anytime soon. Just because you draft a quarterback in the first round doesn't mean he needs to start that year. Look at Aaron Rodgers, one of the best quarterbacks in the game, sat for years after being the second quarterback drafted in his draft class behind Brett Favre. Worked out pretty good for everybody involved, I think. So I have no problems whatsoever with the Eagles making this move and lining up their quarterback picture and future this way. I'm not a Sam Bradford fan at all. I am a Carson Wentz fan. And I think from just the quarterback standpoint that it's going to work out well for the Eagles. From a team standpoint, from a Sam Bradford standpoint, all bets are off on anything working out in those regards until, given reason to believe otherwise. But just to recap why this was such a great deal for the Browns, who, by the way, I felt were going to go with top left tackle prospect Laramie Tunsil if he was available at 2 anyway, based off of their current roster signing RG3 and still having Josh McCown, not letting him go yet either. They've got 2 veteran quarterbacks to get him through the year. They would have to get rid of one of them to draft a quarterback with their first pick, and they haven't done that yet. So, Joe Thomas, he's on his very last leg. They lost their right tackle. It made all the sense in the world to me to have the Browns go tackle, and I think they still will. I think at 8 now, the Browns are looking either, hoping Tunsil falls, or then they're going to go with one of the other 2 best tackles, Conklin or my man Ronnie Stanley out of Notre Dame, who, if I was picking in the top 15 and was looking to get a tackle, he's my guy. He's my top guy, but that's just me. But anyway, recapping what the Browns got, so the Eagles got the number 2 pick and then a 4th round pick in next year's draft. That's what the Eagles get. The Browns got the 8th pick in this year's draft, a 3rd round pick in this year's draft, a 4th round pick in this year's draft, a 1st round pick in next year's draft, and a 2nd round pick in the 2018 draft. So they got 2 1st round picks, a 2nd round pick, a 3rd round pick, and a 4th round pick for a 1st round pick and a 4th round pick. Like that's really, really, really good deal for the Browns, and they have a lot of needs and issues to meet. So, ultimately, I don't think it makes the Eagles any better next year. I don't think it makes the Browns any better next year. But I don't think anything really that they could have done was going to. But it might set both of them up for, more sustainable success over the next couple years. And again, I can't remind you and stress this enough. Tune in next week to hear my mock draft for the 2016 NFL Draft. It's the best one out there. It's better than Mike Mayock. It's better than Mel Kiper. It's better than Todd McShay. It's better than Bucky Brooks. Better than Lance Sterling. Better than Daniel Jeremiah. Better than everybody out there. Okay? I'm telling you. You gotta believe me. So if you're a big fan of the NFL Draft, NFL football, next week's show is an absolute yearly can't miss, and I can't wait. Final bit of NFL news. We got 2 things. One that will affect the draft actually quite a bit. Carolina Panthers recede, I don't know. I can't read. They take away, they removed, there we go, we'll go with that. They removed the franchise tag offer from cornerback super stud Josh Norman, and he is officially an unrestricted free agent as of a few days ago, as of like yesterday. And so that will have a huge impact on the draft because, in my opinion, there's at least 4, 5, 6 corners, defensive backs, that are going to get taken in this first round. And some of, the first 2 or 3 that we're looking to go all in the top 10 to 15 picks, now one of those teams is likely going to sign Josh Norman, and it's going to completely change their draft focus and need. Someone else is going to go up, someone's going to go down, changes who's available for the other people, that changes their selections, and just boom, I'm going to have to refigure out my mock draft once Josh Norman signs with somebody. Hopefully Josh Norman signs with someone before the draft next week. I currently have no leads on that whatsoever, other than it's going to have to be a team with a lot of salary cap space. Some of those teams are the Raiders, the Niners, the Jaguars, all of which I have looking to draft a defensive back in the draft as well. So there's that news. We'll keep an eye on that and let you know more as it develops. And then final bit of NFL news is some bad news for one Johnny, formerly Football Manziel. Not only is he jobless in the NFL at the moment, but he was dropped by Nike as a spokesperson, so he's got no more endorsement checks from Nike coming in. That's a big blow. And even worse than that, what could possibly be worse than that, Scotty Ball? Well, I'll tell you, what's worse than that is he got dropped by the guy who gets him work. His agent, the infamous sports agent Drew Rosenhaus, dropped Johnny Manziel as a client earlier in the week as well. So not only is he out of a job, but he's out of a person to get him a job as well. His court hearing case, charges, whatever, as far as the assault against his one-time girlfriend goes, are still very much in the forefront of his life, not in the rearview mirror, facing ongoing investigation and charges where that's concerned, and it looks like nothing but disaster from here on out for the life of one Johnny Manziel. At least, if I don't know if he can survive to like 30 or 40, somewhere in there, maybe he'll be able to stay afloat past that. But boy, it wouldn't shock me if Johnny joins China and Prince and David Bowie and Lemmy and the many others that we've lost here this year sometime, not necessarily this year, maybe, wouldn't super shock me, but I don't think Johnny's going to live to be an old man, and that's unfortunate. I hope he can figure things out and fix himself inside, so that he can at least live a somewhat happy and productive life away from football. Not, just completely disregarding anything football related, just as a human being. But he's still pretty far off from that, it looks like, from what's in the news recently. All right, that's it for NFL talk. We got 2 more super quick topics, which will lead into our balls deep thought of the day. And the first will be regarding the UFC. Tons of talk in the UFC. Ronda Rousey all of a sudden now not likely to participate at UFC 200, and for some reason Holly Holm isn't going to be taking on Miesha Tate at it either. Miesha Tate is likely to defend her newly won title against someone else. I want to say someone that Ronda's already beat, which would just, oh God, it's already confused and horrible with that picture the way it is. Like, it's going to get so confusing and just watered down. Not going to be good for the UFC if that fight happens and Miesha loses. Now, if Miesha keeps her title, then things will be the way Holly was supposed to. Then things should be looking okay from a booking standpoint for UFC yet in that division. But if not, more trouble for UFC. UFC has been in the news a ton this week, primarily in regards to the big UFC 200 coming up this summer that they're trying to schedule and hype and plan for. And one of the main events was scheduled to be Conor McGregor's rematch at 170 versus Nate Diaz, who beat him recently at that weight. And Conor was not showing up, was refusing to do any of the, pro fight interviews and stuff that they were asking of him recently, which is weird because the fight's not for like 2-3 more months yet, or the event I should say. But he ended up getting pulled from the 200 card, the UFC 200 card. Dana White pulled him off. At least that was Dana White's story. And then Conor McGregor came out and said, "I've decided to retire young. Thanks for the cheese. McGregor out," something like that. And so everybody took that as McGregor has retired abruptly. And I really felt that that's why he worded it the way he did, was that wasn't the case. He said, "I've decided to retire early." He didn't say, "I've decided to retire now," or just retire, or "I've decided to retire young." Well, that could be 2-3 years from now yet. He might consider himself young. He might consider that early. So he left it vague. He didn't specifically say it. But that's how everybody took it. Big uproar. Then he put a simple tweet out recently: "I am not retired. I expect to fight at UFC 200. So clearly, this is a guy that is a master at fight hype and publicity and marketing, both the events that he's working for and his own brand. And that's how I felt, from the whole time. Like, I felt like Conor was trying to turn heel in the UFC over the last 2-3 fights of his career, if he wasn't already. And I feel like he's just, I feel like he's really set on that, and just because he's so good and so entertaining, it doesn't work. He's that heel that gets cheered and adored anyway. And also, it's great publicity. It's a racket, okay? It's the fight racket. You're trying to build buzz and hype and sell tickets, okay? It's the ultimate goal. The whole purpose of all of it is not to see who the better man is. The purpose of all of it is to make the most money for the promoters and the bookers and the fighters and everybody involved. It's a money-making event. And Conor and Dana White both understand this as well as any people in the business. So I think Dana and Conor are kind of trying to start their own little, McMahon-Austin type of feud within their industry. And if that is the case, I think it's brilliant and great, and it'll totally work, assuming that, results and injuries don't throw a monkey wrench into all their plans. But John Bones Jones has come out He has said that he will happily headline main event